The summer is coming to an end. Basketball recruiting starting to heat up even more. The Louisville Cardinals included in 3 different list cuts from 2025 prospects. We'll give you the updates on today's episode of Locked On Louisville Podcast.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what is going on? Welcome into this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville Podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the summer winds down, the sports have stopped sporting like we want them to, but for the remainder of the summer, FanDuel hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. As always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville Podcast is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Basketball recruiting starting to heat up more and more with the AAU season and summer both coming to a conclusion. 3 different 2025 prospects included Louisville in their recent list cuts. We'll give you updates on each of those 3 recruitments from Darryn Peterson, London Jemison, and Inman. We begin with the high-profile recruitment of Darryn Peterson. Peterson is ranked as the 3rd best player in the class, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, 6'5" combo guard. He's absolutely fantastic. Definitely top 3 prospect in my mind, and there's a chance that he might not be number 3, but that's a conversation for a different day. The Cardinals included in his top 8 that he released last week. Included with Louisville was Washington, USC, Ohio State, Kentucky, Kansas State, Kansas, and Arizona. I think it's worth mentioning that he has taken official visits to 2 of those schools, UK and KU. Also worth noting that his visit to Lexington was when John Calipari was the head coach of the Wildcats. Now with Mark Pope, they're still involved. He did make a pretty funny comment about Kentucky that I'm not necessarily sure hurts their chances, but it's just kind of funny just reading it. We'll talk about that here in a second. But the fact that Louisville included in this list cut, pretty significant. I know that when we discussed Darryn Peterson the first time around on the show, it was that he was planning on making an official visit for the fall. And that still is the case. You look at the article from On3.com's Joe Tipton. He says that he basically was on USC's campus this weekend for an official visit. Ohio State and Kansas State will get visits at the end of August. Arizona State and Washington in September, and then Louisville and Kentucky will get the visits in October before a commitment by November. So it seems like the clock is ticking on this recruitment. Now, he spoke about every single one of the schools, and his comments were pretty what you would expect. He said this about Louisville. Coach Pat Kelsey is sticking out to me. I like that coach, the way he's talking with me. He's had a couple of pro guards. Now, that's not the end of the quote, but I'm going to hold that off for a second because what he's about to say next, pretty interesting because it just shows you that Pat Kelsey understands to recruit the upper echelon of recruits. I mean, you have to be able to, put it all onto the table. And I'm not necessarily saying that you have to make so many promises, but you have to show a player that he is a priority. And Peterson says this at the very end. Speaking of Pat Kelsey, he told me that I could come in and he would build the team around me. He's a player that you can build a team around, that's for sure. Peterson is a phenomenal prospect that can play the 1 or the 2 and affect the game in multiple different ways. More on his skill set coming up at the end of this segment. But 2 other excerpts that I found really interesting. This is the comment he made about Kentucky that I thought was funny. He literally starts off by saying the campus wasn't all that great. Now, to be fair, he goes on to give some high praise, but the facilities and where the gym was at was great. They've got everything. I feel like I can go there and get better, and that is the main thing. Even if Cal isn't there, Kentucky is still Kentucky. Coach Mark Pope is still a great coach. So again, the comment he made at the beginning of that quote, it's not going to be like the end-all be-all, but I thought it was funny. Now, I've been to Lexington a handful of times. A handful is probably, definitely underselling. I've been to Lexington more times than I can count on my fingers and toes, but haven't really been on the college campus much. I don't think I ever have. Maybe once or twice, but nonetheless, it is what it is. But pretty interesting. The other comment he made that was the most notable that I took from this was when he was talking about Washington. He says, they're another Adidas school, and I'm an Adidas guy right now. That's pretty significant for the Louisville Cardinals. Also an Adidas school. I know that NIL has pretty much taken control of recruiting for the most part, but shoe allegiances still do matter. Like players that play on the Nike EYBL circuit, highly ranked guys, it's really challenging to get those guys to come to an Adidas school or an Under Armour school. Like, I don't know whether or not this is more significant that it helps Louisville or does it hurt them? Because him being an Adidas guy right now, maybe the right now comment makes you kind of not feel great, but it beats the alternative. So him being an Adidas guy right now, that doesn't hurt Louisville at all. It's a double whammy for the Cardinals. Yes, he has the same brand as you, but he also is not a Nike guy. Both of those things are beneficial. The two schools, now this is pure intuition speaking, because at the moment, we don't really know who the leaders are. He keeps things very close to chest. But I would venture to say that Ohio State is going to be in this till the very end. Yes, Peterson plays at Huntington Prep in Huntington, West Virginia. However, he's from Ohio, and he had this to say about Ohio State. That's the hometown. Coach Jake Diebler said he wanted to have me in the ball screen action a lot. That's big for me, playing the point guard position. I mean, I think he plays point guard for Louisville too, but nonetheless, I digress for the moment. Being the hometown team, he mentions also, in the Washington segment, basically says that you don't have to go to a big school to get drafted high. I'm not saying that to throw shade at Ohio State. I'm saying that you don't have to go to a blue blood to go to the NBA and get drafted high. That's been shown over the past couple of draft classes. And with NIL and how things are, you can get fairly compensated at non-blue blood programs and still get to go to the NBA under good coaching. So it's pretty interesting to see, or it's going to be interesting to see how Ohio State plays under Jake Diebler this season, but he's likely going to have made a commitment by then, so it really does not matter. Okay. Ohio State is going to be a challenge here. I also think being an Adidas guy, already having visited campus, Kansas is going to be really tough. Bill Self is recruiting like a man possessed at the moment in the transfer portal, have one of the best transfer portal classes. The Jayhawks are going to be truly formidable competition, to say the very least. And I think Kentucky remains involved, but Arizona State seems to be throwing out really high NIL offers. We've seen that in a couple of recruitments. Overall, going to be a really tough one to win. But Pat Kelsey's swinging for the fences, and this recruitment sort of epitomizes that for good reason. Darryn Peterson, he has one of the highest floors in the class. 6'5" combo guard that can do a little bit of everything. Capable and willing passer, solid defender, doesn't really get sped up or slowed down, gets to his spots with ease, smooth scorer, 3-level scorer that shoots well off the dribble, off movement, catch and shoot situations, just phenomenal player. You put the players up against each other on a tier list. Not only does he have one of the highest ceilings, but he's got one of the highest floors as well. So the ceiling is there to be a top draft pick, but he also, I think, can be a really good college player right away. And that's where Pat Kelsey said, look, I could build a team around this guy for good reason. There's a difference between like a borderline top 10 guy and Darryn Peterson. Darryn Peterson, like I said, he's top 3, and I'm not sure that he's number 3. I think that he can be even better than that. So to get, I won't say to get truly involved in this recruitment, to feel like you have a good shot, you have to knock that official visit out of the park. It doesn't help that Pat Kelsey is at a disadvantage with some of these higher-rated guys because he hasn't had the time to develop the relationship like the other coaches. Now, same goes with Mark Pope. Both schools make the cut. So I think that October month with the visits to Kentucky and Louisville, a lot can change with both of those. And hopefully Louisville has the final visit because that would be absolutely huge. And if there is one prospect that could completely change the tone of the way Louisville recruiting is perceived, it's for a guy like Darryn Peterson. Unanimous top 5 player, can play multiple different positions. Not to mention the skill set. Like, it's not like he has a skill set that just doesn't fit the system and you sort of have to make it work. Darryn Peterson's skill set is pretty similar to what Pat Kelsey is looking to get out of his guards. So really interested to see what Pat Kelsey tells Peterson moving forward, how the relationship builds, if he is going to be on campus for a football game, which hopefully he is. I know that Louisville plays SMU at home. I'm trying to think of who all else Louisville plays in October at home. I think Miami is in that, right? Is Miami in that? I'm all over the place mentally. But nonetheless, Darryn Peterson, fantastic player. One of the recruitments that you need to keep an eye out on, and a player that recently cut his list and included Louisville, thankfully. There are 2 more. The first of the 2 is also a top 40 player, just inside the top 40, a high riser in the class. One that Louisville just offered not too recently, and the Cardinals landed in London Jamison's top 6. We'll break down Louisville's chances coming up here in the next segment of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode of the show brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including talk about conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and much, much more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're not discussing football on the show today, but I think it is important that we get that podcast talked about because Spencer does a great job. But continuing along in the basketball recruiting realm for the Cardinals, the second player that recently included the Cardinals in his top list cut is London Jameson. I believe it's Jameson, spelled Jemison. I would imagine it's either Jameson or Jemison. We're going to say Jameson. If I'm wrong, forgive me. I'm human. But pretty interesting here that Louisville offered Jameson back on June 12th of this summer, and they were included in his list cut. Now, he included Louisville with Vanderbilt, Kansas, Alabama, Virginia, and Syracuse. Now, I would say that it's notable that he included Louisville right after they visited, but he's not their most recent offer, they're not his most recent offer, I should say. Looking at the list there, got the offer from Louisville on June 12th. Alabama also in the top 6, offered on May 31st. Kansas offered on July 18th. And Vanderbilt offered on July 29th. Literally, he just announced his list cut like a couple days ago. And Vanderbilt offered at the beginning of last week. and they're in the top 6. Now, he doesn't have many Power 5 offers outside of that. I think Xavier is up there. He's got a couple of Big East offers. Penn State also on that list, but Wake Forest as well, Cincinnati. But I think that that's really, really interesting. He's scheduled visits for 5 of the 6. He's already visited Syracuse, Vanderbilt, Kansas, Alabama, Louisville, Virginia in that order. Vanderbilt and KU in August, Bama, U of L, and UVA in September. Virginia will be his final visit scheduled. He'll make his way to the Derby City when Louisville is on a bye week. Don't even get me started how frustrated I am that Louisville has a bye week during the 3rd week of the season. Like, yeah, it might be like a competitive advantage to keep guys healthy and get a little bit more preparation for Georgia Tech in the 3rd game of the season. But when you wait from December to August 31st for college football, and then boom, week 3, bye week. It's like, dude, come on. I get it. Doesn't make me happy as an avid Louisville football fan, but I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole too much more. Jameson rose up the rankings a good amount playing on the Nike EYBL circuit. 6'7" power forward from St. Thomas More High School out of Oakdale, Connecticut. Ranked as the 37th best player in the 24/7 Sports Composite, 12th best power forward, the top player in Connecticut. His skill set sort of reminds me of like a Javon Hadley that we saw play this past week, sort of a prototypical wing / small ball 4 on this team. With the limited amount of film that we've seen from this summer, he looked like a more than capable 3-point shooter with the potential to be a really respectable perimeter guy in college. Not really any issues with the mechanical or with the mechanics of the jump shot. He battles around the rim, tenacious rebounder, huge effort guy, especially in the paint. A lot of his offense comes from putbacks and slashing to the rim. Solid on-ball defender. I feel like he's the skill set and the lateral quickness to be a versatile guy that can guard the 2 through the 4. And like I mentioned, a good job of being a slasher. He's not a primary or secondary ball handler or creator, but I think he can be a tertiary level guy, sort of like a Javon Hadley that can be featured in the offense of not really doing too much, but knowing his role and executing it to a perfection. So Jameson is rising up the boards with a solid AAU season, and I think he definitely could be a candidate for even more of a rise in the rankings. It's a pretty interesting group of recruiting. Being on the EYBL circuit, I think automatically you can't rule Alabama out. I think Alabama is going to be a very interesting team in this recruitment. Same with Virginia. Virginia always feels like they get one of those borderline top 40 players that come in and are just a thorn in Louisville's side for 3 to 4 years. And we're like, dude, can you just leave? Hopefully that's not the case. Alabama and Virginia going to be in the mix. I also think Kansas with, like I said, Bill Self is recruiting like a madman. You really can't overlook the Jayhawks at this point because it feels like he's taking that Sweet 16 loss extremely personal. It wasn't the Sweet 16. It was around a 32, but nonetheless, I digress. I'm not going to go any much further into that. I do want to see how or what the interest in Vanderbilt is. Like the Commodores just offered. And I know that they got a new coach, and it's escaping me on who that is. Give me a second while I look that up. Well, I should have already had that looked up. Mark Byington, named as the new head coach. I just really want to know, like, how involved is Vanderbilt going to get, because they literally just offered it. Now they're throwing in there. Now Byington led James Madison, and James Madison had a really, really good season. Ask Terrence Edwards that question. But pretty interesting. I think that Louisville getting onto this list and being scheduled for a visit is pretty significant. I think his skill set fits what Pat Kelsey's looking for at that position. And this feels like the MO of Louisville recruiting historically is they go out and they make their mark by getting like the top 40, top 50 guys that can come in and develop. And by year 2, year 3, they're developed to the point to where the veteran-led team can have a good amount of success. So you have your 5-star level guy in Darryn Peterson. You have your top 40 guy in London Jameson. But there is another player that we're going to talk about on this show that doesn't hold a Louisville offer, but yet they landed on this player's top 5. We'll discuss who that is in the final segment of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode of the show brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports, truthfully, almost as much as I love breathing. Probably toxic, but we can live with it. Sports aren't really sporting like we want them to in early August. The end of the month is coming, but FanDuel continually lets you capitalize by offering boosts and bonuses daily. You can dream up bets anytime that you're in the mood. Go to FanDuel.com and see all the odds that they have for the Olympics. Some great odds that I made a decent amount of money on, thankfully, with their boosts and bonuses that are really user-friendly. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of the remainder of the summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And into the final segment of this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Talked about the 5-star recruit. Talked about the top 44-star recruit. There's a 3-star recruit that just cut his list to 5. Louisville's in that list, but he doesn't currently hold a Louisville offer. That player is Inman from College Park High School in the Woodlands, Texas. For those that aren't really geographically inclined, the Woodlands is right outside of Houston, so he plays some really solid competition right outside the Houston metro, where Quentin Grimes came from, Kansas, Houston, then to the New York Knicks. But he cut his list to 5: Colorado, Colorado State, West Virginia, Rice, and Louisville. The Cardinals are the only school that has not offered of those 5. Pretty interesting. He has scheduled all 5 visits, which he will be conducting in the month of September. I'm going to read those off. Rice, Colorado, Colorado State, West Virginia, and Louisville. Louisville will get the visit on September 28th. That's the day the Cardinals play up in South Bend at Notre Dame, so no football action, but they will get the final visit. The thing about it is they haven't offered. So why is Louisville being included? Well, Inman said this in an article from Brandon Jenkins of 247sports.com when he was asked about every single team. He says about Louisville, they came in late but won my heart over with their style of play. It's a new staff. I feel like I could come in and produce and be a player they need. So Louisville coming into the recruitment late, it seems like they're keeping tabs on this guy. One of two things. Maybe they're doing their due diligence in scouting, thinking, hey, we're going to take our time and determine if this is a guy that we could see being really helpful for our program. Or number 2, they're waiting to see what other players that they prioritize, maybe a little bit more, what they do with their visit scheduled and commitment set. Now, Inman did say in this recruitment in this article that he wanted to make his commitment by the middle of October and sign during that early signing period in November. So it seems like the clock is ticking. But what he said about Louisville is pretty interesting, because I didn't even think about this as a benefit to Louisville playing in the preseason in the Bahamas, is that recruits got to watch the Cardinals play now, albeit it was on YouTube, but it's still a way to watch. Shout out to Floyd Street Media for the great content that we got for both of those games against the Bahamas Select Team and the University of Calgary. But I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think that you can see how Pat Kelsey's teams play in the preseason if you're a recruit and you want to know, Pat Kelsey did great at Charleston. What's this team's going to look like here at Louisville? Well, you got a small glimpse of what it's going to look like. And thankfully, the Cardinals looked really good. I mean, they scored 111 in both games and got 2 blowout victories. So, again, couldn't hurt. Not sure how much it helps, but couldn't hurt. Ian Inman already having mentioned that. That's pretty interesting, because I want to see if any other recruits sort of mention that as, hey, look, got to see Louisville play a little bit, and it was fun to watch them play. Inman, I don't know if there is a common denominator with both Colorado and Colorado State and why they're in this top 5. Rice has prioritized him more than anyone. Rice is in Houston, so Rob Lanier and company have obviously put all the eggs in the Ian Inman basket. And then West Virginia is another school that has been atop of Inman's list for quite some time. So what type of a player is Inman? Sort of like London Jameson. He's in that Javon Hadley skill set. The potential is there to be a really, really good shooter at the next level, whether it be off movement, spot up, catch and shoot situations. I thought that in the AAU circuit, he showed really good shooting skills. Post up. Most of his offense, I think a good portion of his offense comes from posting up smaller defenders in the paint and sort of utilizing an underrated footwork and shot making to be effective and efficient around the rim. Put defensive versatility on display. Like Jameson, I think 2 through the 4 guarding could be on the docket. And I think that there is a world where Inman is a secondary level creator for the right program. Again, he's a 3-star guy that's not ranked. So we'll see if Louisville starts to prioritize him. I think one of 2 things is going to happen. Well, they're either going to offer or they're not. Yeah, that's groundbreaking prediction there, Dalton. Good job. If they don't offer, then you can consider this segment a moot point. But if they do, I think it's because of one of 2 reasons. Number one, they did their scouting, and they're like, yep, we think that this guy can really help this program. We're going to put the full court press on him. We're going to offer him. We're going to wow him during his final visit schedule. Or number 2, which could be as equally as likely, maybe their top priorities unfortunately decide to choose other schools, and Louisville is forced with having to pivot toward Inman. And maybe that's why they haven't offered yet, is that they've got their sights set on other players, and Inman unfortunately might be on the back burner. Hopefully, either way, Louisville can get involved if they want to get involved, but we'll see. But the main thing here, when we talked about the other prospect a little while ago, whose name is escaping me, I think also from the state of Texas, who I think is going to go play in Phoenix. I really am forgetting his name. Forgive me for that. If Louisville doesn't offer, it doesn't matter. But if they do, it's pretty interesting. But the fact that the Cardinals are on this list and not having offered, yeah, it means something for sure. A lot of these recruitments are going to take off a little bit more through the next couple months. Many players visiting campus. We'll try to identify who the top priorities are, because at this point it's really challenging to see because there's so many players that are involved at the moment. As we continue on through the week, on tomorrow's episode of the show, we'll break a little bit of Cardinal Media Day down. Jeff Braun, the company, spoke to the media. 2 really, really bad announcements as it relates to injuries on both sides of the football that are going to hurt this team. And then we'll dive into a weekly mailbag. So everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here